Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for being on. This should only take us about 10 minutes or so, but I wanted to make sure that all of us were aware and on the same page with the most recent changes in the policy and guidelines document from Keller Williams International as it relates to special events payable and excess E&O reserves. So let me pull up the document real quick so we can look at it together. So anytime you're referring to the P&G manual, please make sure that you're looking at the one that shows the date 8/14/19 revision, which is the most recent one. This is what was voted on just recently and incorporated in. So real quickly to go over this is the excess E&O reserve liability account is capped at the greater of 10% of the market center's average sales price or twice the market center's KW owner profit for the previous calendar year. So this is something that we've historically thought it could only, the previous policy was that it was capped at 50,000, and now it's the greater of 10% of the average sales price or twice the previous year's owner profit. So for most of our offices, that gives us a huge range there, way above $50,000 to start building up some excess there. So right now, and again, I'm not an MCA, so I need a little bit of direction back from you guys. Right now, every month, you guys are making a transfer from excess E&O over to special events. Is that right? Is there a systematic piece that happens that, or what triggers that? Dina, you're on mute. Sign language. Do sign it for me. Act it out. Nope.
So for the excess C&O account, ours can't be over 25 grand, and so we would transfer that to special events, and then anything that we need to transfer so that it matches our account, we have to do like within the bank.
Okay, so that rule has changed now that the max is not 25,000. So for Midvale, the owner profit was 111,000 last year. So you can have up to $222,000 in that account now and still be in compliance.
Okay.
Okay. KW Success, last year our profit was 126. St. George, what was our profit there last year? Oh, no sound. Easier to act out though, because it's just numbers. Okay, so number one, we want to make sure that because we're in this balance now of
It's working.
Oh, there you go. I hear you now.
Hello. I think I ran out of juice.
So one, I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that we can start stacking up money in the excess E&O. Now that doesn't mean we're just going to build it up to double the amount, but it changes the rule about how we transfer money over to the special events fund. The second piece of this is the special events payable account should not exceed $50,000. So this is something that we're already watching. But on each one of your balance sheets, this is where we are running into the problem is because we were pushing money from excess E&O over to special events payable, there was a couple of our offices that were getting in excess of the $50,000 in the special events payable, which that throws a red flag at Keller Williams International if we're in excess of 50,000. So I want you to
what I got trained on was anything over the 50 had to start moving into miscellaneous income. You had to take that bottom of the line income.
So that is true when we get to the point of anything in excess of that special events. But what we want to do is leave the money in excess E&O because we've got so much leeway still there.
Yeah,
so
that's
we can
beautiful.
be more strategic in how to process and use that money.
Yep.
So every month, one of the checks that we're going to look at right before transmittal is we're going to look at, I want you to double check your balance sheet to make sure the number one special events is not in excess of 50,000. And if it is showing in excess of 50,000, we can push that money back into excess E&O or start talking strategically about when to push that into other income.
Right.
But it gives us one extra layer here of how to process and balance that money out instead of feeling forced to push it from excess E&O and forced to push it from special events. Okay. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The second piece of the puzzle is kind of going back and looking at this. I don't feel like we're expensing everything that we possibly could out of special events. Some of the things that should be being charged against the special event fund we're just expensing as expenses within our market center. So basically what it says in here, it gives a couple examples. Examples of special events that could be allowed. So here's just giving a couple examples. This is not inclusive. Could be allowed are award ceremony, a holiday party, a market center inspirational breakfast, or taking recruits to family reunion. So one of the things that's going to be your responsibility as the MCA and the leader in the office that is the steward of our money is we need to be looking in advance of what's coming up that we should be spending special event money for instead of expensing it to the market center. So for example, if we're, some examples of this is if we end up having a sponsor back out of a team meeting and we as an office are funding something that benefits our agent, that could potentially be covered out of the special events fund. If we're sponsoring an agent to go to Floyd Wickman, or someone doesn't show up, or we've got to cover that expense, they could be paid out of special events. There's things that are servicing our agents.
Or mastermind breakfast or lunch.
Our mastermind breakfast and lunches. Yep, those type of things could all be charged against this account. So I think we're a place that we're missing the mark, and I say we collectively, is we just quickly look at that special events fund and be like, oh, it's within compliance, but we're not asking the question like, are we utilizing that account for what it's really set up for, which is a lot of the stuff we have going on that really is to benefit our agents. Does that make sense? So one thing I would recommend you guys to do is start looking ahead 30, 45 days of what's coming down the chute, and let's plan for it and how we can use those funds for it instead of at the end of every month just quickly going through the checklist and saying, oh, it's in compliance, let's move on. Any questions in regards to that?
Just to reiterate what you said, because ours has gotten depleted quite a bit because of a enormous increase in our premiums. And so I'm actually very sensitive to it, because knowing that if we have an awards function coming at the end of the year, I think through the whole thing. Like, yes, this will qualify as something this month. However, I got to make sure I've got some kind of cushion come the end of the year. So me personally, I'm pretty cognizant. That's probably the first question I ask on some kind of event expenditure is, can it apply to this account? But then don't deplete that account so much that I can't take care of what I know is coming up in December or January or next, whatever that is. So I try to stay on top of that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's the intention of having a leader MCA that is a steward of our budget, a steward of our money, more than a bookkeeper of just like, oh, I'm going through a checklist, check, right? So that we need to, as a team, plan like, how are we using that? Blake, a great example of this is the Night with KW that's going on right now that is to serve our agents. Are we utilizing the special events fund for that? If we're running a client appreciation event that we as an office are funding, which we never should be doing, that should be all funded by the agents. But if we have to step in and cover part of that expense, it could be utilized for the special events fund. If you ever have a question around it, let's open a conversation around it up front. But I want you guys to be aware of it. But I noticed this was something that wasn't quite being processed and looked at correctly, particularly with the change in the policy that I wanted to cover with everyone. Anything else that we need to cover in regards to that as a group?
Can you go do the total, scroll up to the top again, and just what is that ratio?
Which paragraph?
The part about the maximum in the,
The excess E&O reserve liability count is capped at the greater of 10% of the market center's average sales price. So what that would be for most of us, that would be like 30 grand.
Right.
Twice the market center's KW owner profit from the previous calendar year.
Or greater of that, or twice the owner profit of the previous year.
Yeah. So like what was St. George's owner profit last year?
Well, let's say 70.
So that would be 140,000, right? So just be double what it was the previous year.
Yeah,
so we can watch that. And we'll probably not get it to that level, and then but it gives us some ability then to decide when are we transferring it to other income, right, if that makes sense for the market center.
And not a flag. That's important.
Yes. Yep. And that not flag, and it's not a flag, Keller.
Right.
Okay. Real quickly, let me stop the recording. Then I got one more quick question for you guys.
Off the record.
Off the record.